Contention 1 is inherency. Current highway legislation increases fares for riders and does not resolve access problems and mass transit. The new bill removes federal capital funding requirements for previous legislation and neglects the increase of reliance on mass public transit. Lane 12. A heat for a bill on public transportation system called the $120 billion highway bill and death blow to mass transit that will result in higher fares for riders comprised between the House and the Senate on surface transportation. Spending that will limit public transportation. The result will be higher fares for mass transit riders. This transportation is a death blow to public transportation. It not only does nothing, but it will make it much worse. It is actually a tax increasing bill while forcing systems to cut services. The original bill had a provision dealing funding requirements, but the language did not survive negotiations. One more Americans are relying on public transportation. This will be a hit right there by this bill legislation because it needs to start mass transit and further weakens our economic recovery. And status quo implementation of transportation infrastructure is profoundly neoliberal policymakers focus on market mechanism and privatization, racism, and social exclusion. Farmer 11. Urbanization processes shaped by neoliberals, the creative destruction process of neoliberal state consequently produces new forms of uneven geographic development. Cities emerge as crucial cities of neoliberal relations and institutional reconstruction. The U.S. neoliberal policies reconstructed the organization by deploying the relative centralized leadership system of urban planning, financial, and federal level to sub-regional states and local localities, or forcing finance local infrastructure, transit, housing, and other forms of collective consumption on their own, abandon them altogether. In order to finance new urban transit policies, cash-strapped entrepreneurial governments are increasing entering into the long-term partnership of private sector and private partnerships, increasing favor of affluent segments of the population rather than larger public, led by the privileging market-based methods of efficiency and entrepreneurial administration that change the function of public transportation. Statecraft abandons mobilizing public transportation to enhance economically disadvantaged groups and displace socially progressive neoliberal practices favor market-oriented growth and lead consumption patterns. And this attempt to exterminate public spaces is indicative of neoliberal large ideological function as a system to equal social exclusion and racial apartheid. Giroux 04. The global forces of neoliberalism are the march of dismantling the historical guaranteed social provision, defining profit marketing as the essence of democracy and equating freedom with the understated ability of markets to govern economic relations of freely government regulation. Is the capacity to dishistorialize and depoliticalize society as well as its aggressive attempt to destroy all public space necessary for the defense of genuine democracy. Neoliberalism produces the conditions for unleashing the most brutal forces of capitalism. Within the discourse of neoliberalism, the notion of public good is devolved, and limited public search as transmission are now the subject of rules of market. Neoliberal ideology produces a legitimate and exacerbates the existence between a persistent poverty and inequity in healthcare, racial apartheid in the inner cities, and the growing inequalities between the rich and the poor. And racism is the logic of extermination. Element 02, state racism is a recoding of the old mechanism of the blood through the new procedures of regulation. Racism is biological, is a tie to a state to take shapes with procedures of innovation. At the level of the body, conduct health and everyday life, receive their color at their justification for the medical concern for protecting the purity of the blood and ensuring the triumph of the race. Society is too longer needed to be defended from the outside, but from the inside of the abnormal behavior species or race. A break is fundamental to racism, division or decision between those who must live and those who must die. Modern racism puts us in a place to survive, to live. One must be prepared to massacre one's enemy. A relation of war. As a relation of war, this is no different from the earlier war on races. Apocalyptic rhetoric should be abandoned as a political strategy incorrectly levels questions of probability and actual magnitude of events grossing yields 12. Flip through the cable channels and you'll evidently find the apocalypse true. Turn to the news channel and the headlines appear equally apocalyptic declared. You'll find people arguing on the true public effect to our way of life is not the empathetic collapse of economic system and biodiversity of the collapse of the dollar as it grows. Global currency, how to make sense of it all. After all, not every scenario can be apocalyptic threat to our way of life, can it? For many, the tendency is to dismiss all the potential crises that we're facing as an overblown. For the others, the panoply of potential disasters become overblown, leading to destroy and no vision of reality and threats facing our life. The media have long mastered the form of packaging remote possibilities and urgent threat. Nothing is far to feel like the end of the world. The tendency toward the outright speculation has been increasing, married to rhetoric and apocalypse today. Nearly in any way can be explained through apocalyptic brain that using drastic language of apocalyptic metal various scenarios has the level of apocalyptic playing field. Leaving the view and impression that terrorism, bird flu, global warming, and asteroids are equally probable. And neoliberal thinkers control the framework of policy discussions. You should be highly skeptical of this and their defenses of this ideology. Ross 10. The first step in resisting neoliberalism is realizing that we are not all in this together. Neoliberal benefits the few and the expense of the many. Debates about social goods are framed in the ways that interest the neoliberal elites. The frame is presented as common sense, thus assumption underlying the frame are typically unquestioned or at least underanalyzed. And Plan. The United States federal government should substantially increase its investment in free and socially just accessible mass transit in the United States. And contention 2, solvency agreements about public transit solves this and concrete political strategy refuses crisis-based politics and creates the conditions for broad-based movements against neoliberalism. China 11. The demand for free and accessible public transit has the potential to develop into a broad-based movement. The expression of the radical anti-capitalist principle, the outright modification of public goods and services. The free campaign is pushing us to elaborate both and good strategic things. But to our future environment, such as the limits of capitalism of public sector, unions and interlocking forms of exclusion faced by the people marginalized by poverty, racism, integration, sex, or disability. Free transit represents a sign of convergence between many anti-activist circles and fosters greater integration and collaboration between environmental advocacy and anti-poverty work and diverse human rights organizations. The innovation to imagine free transit is an innovation for French trans rights to imagine themselves not simply as consumer but of a commodity, but as members of the public entitled to participate in a convergence about what the kind of city they want to live in. The call for free transit amongst the things that we value: vibrant neighborhoods, clean air, water, participation in politics, equitable distribution of resources, public space, and we are free to speak, gather, play, and organize. Even the most skeptical responses to the idea of free transit. How will you fund it? The operating productive conservation about taxation control over public resources. The call for free transit effectively opens a space for unscripted and political dialogue about the meaning of fair taxation, public goods, collective priorities, and public accountability for the resources allocation. Free transit is a rare example of political project on the left that is not perceived defensive in the South or allowance, but hopeful to seek out and develop the kinds of relationships and democratic spaces are necessary to sustain grassroots movements over the long term. The push for an excellent, fully public and accessible transit system is a radical demand. And solving for transportation equity allows us to address and deconstruct other forms of racism in the United States policy, since transportation connects to all types of aspects of our life. But all communities do not receive the same benefits of the transportation, despite the heroic efforts of the remains of the civil rights issue. Transportation touches on every aspect of where we live, work, and play, go to school, as well as physical and natural world. Transportation plays a pivotal role in the shape of community interaction, economic mobility, and sustainability. Transportation serves as a key component in addressing poverty, unemployment, and equal opportunity goals while ensuring the process to education, healthcare, and other public services. Transportation equity is consistent with both the larger civil rights movement and environmental justice movement to million transportation defined as a right basic to any other quality of life. The continued residential segregation of people of color away from suburban job centers where public transportation is not existing in many single new form of residential part-time transportation investments have proven advantages of some communities, while at the same time other communities have been disadvantaged by transportation decision making. And deconstructing neoliberalism is what we need to do. Socially just forms of government. Round of 3 remains from the left. Then it's a challenge of emerging neoliberal government with the ultimate vision of goodness, a vision with justice, with not centered upon maximizing individual rights, but on developing and enhancing the capacity of citizens to share power and collaboration governing a vision will focus on the moderate distribution of wealth and access to institutions and instant reckoning of all forms and the importance of both meaningful activity and hospitality to one to human fortune. None of these can be derived from the neoliberal rationality. The development of such a counter-rationality is critical to the fashioning a more just future and to immediate challenges the deadly process of the imperial U.S. state. And the role of the ballot is who best produces who produces the best knowledge to the political press. I now stand ready for process.
Alright. Wait, what is socially just?
So socially just is within our context is like creating a government for a socially just government. Okay, so like a socially just plan would be like things like transportation that is not racist and does not have neoliberal policies. Explain what neoliberalism is. So neoliberalism is like, for example, a company GM and how GM kind of controls how like the United States government works through transportation, because GM is like this all powerful. And other companies than GM, so people that control.
It's like anti-corporation, I guess.
Not exactly.
Okay, so how do you know that giving people free transit only like the white racist people in America look down and even want to do free healthcare? You know how like white racist America look down when people receive government funds, right? Okay. How will giving them free transportation not change this? Or not make it worse?
I mean, this is for everybody. This is also for
of course, and so it's about fair, and
so we don't do Medicaid, so we don't really discriminate against.
But no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it is free. Like
where do these people go with this free transit?
I mean, buses that already exist now would become free.
No, he's saying where would people go with this free transit?
Oh, they could, I mean, like, it isn't as much about where we go, but it's more about, like that's what our Shine Events is talking about, where it's more about how if we have free transit, people will people no longer see themselves.
What are you going to do about public transportation that's like half private and half public, like Amtrak? Are you going to buy them out?
No, okay. So like through the in our Shine and Grow events, we're saying like social movements and grassroots movements are going to be able to like, basically.
Aren't you abiding by the same government that made transportation racist to solve it?
Okay, so that's what our Shine events is talking about, and Brown events that we're deconstructing
policies within the United States government.
You're deconstructing neoliberalism through neoliberal policy using neoliberalism.
Through grassroots movements. Okay.
But your plan says it's federal government.
Okay, and see if you totally ignore like my evidence and my shine evidence that talk about how the social movements and how the grassroots movements will deconstruct neoliberalism.
I understand social movements and grassroots.
So therefore, we're not like.
Are you
using the We're not using the United States federal government.
So why do you not even advocacy statement instead?
Yeah, what do you got with
Grassroots movements at the forefront, people who need it at the forefront. Why did you place the oppressor in the front and not
okay, because we actually need to use a political strategy.
Okay, so Judge Jones, our term solves because neoliberalism as well as capitalism is the root cause of the black feminism and the oppression of just people of color, oppression of females, oppression of whites, oppression of anybody. They don't do that within this round. They do not deconstruct neoliberalism whatsoever. And so, permanent plan neoliberalism justifies the oppression of marginalized voices, the political people. As a result, the plan allows for radical shift in epistemology, which socially excluded the marginalized voices like women and people of color, and we don't discriminate against gender. Permanent in the policy discussion, the active pragmatic solution to whatever way. Also, perm to do both. We have to deconstruct within this round. We have to deconstruct masculinity. Can only add to our solvency and vice versa. Embracing the best form of the pedagogical to deconstruct the intersection of oppression, isolating a single form of oppression fails. And within this round, they talk about masculinity, how it's a problem, and how it equals sexism. Within this round, we solve because I'm not done with that. Within this round, we solve because we actually deconstruct masculinity, which is the root cause of their problem, which is also the root cause of neoliberalism. Therefore, we should win this round because, throughout this whole entire round, they only say reject us. Their actual statement is reject segregation of people and creating black feminist epistemology, solving in society. We need their interpretation. We need their advocacy statement. We solve their advocacy statement by deconstructing masculinity through a political strategy, and I'll get onto how that political strategy will work later. But instead, our Porter and Fernando Ochoa talks about how infrastructure key to gender equality focuses on discourse of gender transportation development, prevents action. We actually, through our mass transit, we actually deconstruct and we allow for gender equality within the mass transit, and just within mass transit, we don't discriminate on between buses, cars, whatever. We allow gender equality for all, and they also kind of made a little short argument about spending, about how this spends building and doesn't really spend building again, and I'm gonna get on to how that happens through social movements and our grassroots movements within our drill events. Extend our hands and 10 events about the mobility through transportation infrastructure, the key to break down gender binaries. Only through passing our plan are we really able to break down these binaries and actually work with the bottom. Therefore, it is key for you to pass the plan. And continuing back onto case. So they totally dropped our Eldon O2 evidence that talks about the logic of racism exterminates the people of color, and we again people of color being black feminists, things like that. They totally dropped this argument. Therefore they concede. Therefore they don't do anything within this round to actually identify racism. They don't do anything to actually solve for racism. They only bring up this policy and they don't create any policy whatsoever. They talk about using the Black Panther movement and other movements and how they how other movements were successful, like civil rights movements, but within this round, they don't use any movements whatsoever. They only bring up this discussion of the policy. And yeah, we recognize and we acknowledge their discussion, but we actually do something to this to solve their discussion. Just continuing, neoliberalism is neoliberalism is the root cause of black women. The name does nothing to solve for their own advocacy statement except saying reject all forms of segregation because we don't socially segregate in any way whatsoever through our plan, and PERM is the only way to solve for the oppression within black feminism and within socially just transformation. Through deconstructing neoliberal policies in this round, we are able to stop sexism, racism, and social exclusion. What is this?
You can read that if you want.
Gotcha. Okay, and then, so onto our Jaro events and how we use social movements and grassroots movements within this round. So yeah, within this round, okay, so our Jaro evidence talks about how we need to have a discussion within this round, and just like both teams, we do use a discussion within this round, and through this discussion, we are able to actually implement grassroots movements, for example, through our education that we put out. For example, you obviously know the Varsity Debater, Davon Love. He used his education within this debate round to actually go out and start a movement to actually create political change. Within this round, within the education that we here produce, we're able to actually use the education that we use in this debate round to go out through our directors to go out and create a grassroots, to create a movement to actually implement this policy. Which again, back to the solvency overview, is just able to solve for where is it? Okay, so able to solve for deconstructing capitalism, creating free transit, not allowing not allowing for sexism to really exist within society. And let's see what else.
about that argument.
Explain how to shine, how like it creates mass grassroots movements.
Okay, so yeah, the shine evidence creates grassroots movements. Let me see, where's the shine? So the shine evidence creates grassroots movement by allowing, like, again, within this discussion of the debate round, for allowing us to actually play, talk about, and do anything else, like have a discussion within this debate round. Like, it allows for people to actually feel like they're part of politics, and it's important for people to feel like they're part of politics so that they can actually implement policies and actually go towards the United States government. And like, they're talking about how the cycle of how we use the government, but the government is oppressive. Again, they don't understand our plan about we're deconstructing the racist policies within the government to actually do this through our social movements.